The man possessed boundless wealth and a handsome appearance, but what he craves most is the taste of blood. He often used his striking looks to hunt young girls. Today, we bring you a dark, twisted version of a fairy tale, Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf. In the future, Earth has been reduced to a wasteland, but humanity has created a virtual world, a place where dreams come true. By using a special eye drop, people can enter this virtual realm and live out their desires. In this illusionary world, anything is possible if you have money. For those without wealth, however, they can buy just a small amount of the eye drop for a brief taste of this otherworldly experience. Lily, born into a poor family, had always longed to experience this legendary virtual world. She saved up for a long time, and finally, she was able to afford her chance. When Lily first enters the virtual world, she is instantly captivated by its dazzling beauty. Everything around her exceeds her wildest expectations. The waiter arrives with 2 glasses. He tells her that a man named Gray sent them. Lily is immediately enchanted by this handsome stranger, and Gray generously gifts her a bottle of eye drops. Seeing his extravagant gesture, Lily can't bring herself to refuse him. Gray then sent a command to the system in his mind. The next moment, they were both teleported to a luxurious suite. Lily immediately lay down on the bed. Gray kept complimenting her, saying how beautiful she looked today. But soon enough, Gray revealed his true nature. He casually exposed the fact that Lily was just a poor girl, here to experience the virtual world. Using his admin privileges, he effortlessly removed Lily's disguise. She tried to leave, but Gray suddenly lunged at her. He savored the rush that blood gave him. However, it was clear that Gray was far from satisfied. He pulled out a knife and kept going until Lily's vital signs completely faded away. Gray was an executive at the company that developed the virtual world. Although he could indulge in the thrills the virtual realm provided, none of that could satisfy Gray's twisted desires. What he truly craved was the pleasure of hunting others, the rush that came from taking lives in the real world. He loved the color and taste of blood, but these were things the virtual world could never give him. For this reason, Gray saw himself as the Big Bad Wolf, using his handsome appearance to lure young girls into his grasp. One late night, Gray once again tricked several girls into his trap, preparing for another hunt. But lately, he had been killing so many that his colleague, William, intervened to stop him. Though they both held vast wealth and power, it was only a matter of time before Gray's killing spree would catch up to him. William handed Gray an address, telling him to seek out a woman named Ethel. William assured Gray that at that place, he would find everything he had ever wanted. After some searching, Gray arrived at a shabby house in the slums, where he found Ethel. He immediately expressed his desire to hunt, offering any amount of money for the opportunity. Ethel quickly agreed to his request, but she said it would take some time to prepare. Ethel began analyzing Gray's personality. Then, from the system, she selected the perfect prey for him, a girl named Scarlet. A few days later, Ethel sent Gray the address where Scarlet would appear. In a chaotic place full of desire, Scarlet was preparing to leave when a thug blocked her path. Clearly, Scarlet wasn't interested in him, but the thug slapped her to the ground. At that moment, Gray suddenly appeared, shoving the thug aside. Scarlet, seizing the opportunity, grabbed a brick and knocked him out cold. The two of them quickly escaped the scene, with Gray following closely behind Scarlet. Despite everything, Scarlet hadn't said a single word of thanks. She told Gray that she could handle things on her own, and didn't need his help. However, before they parted, Scarlet did say one thing: "Thank you." As Gray watched Scarlet smile at him, he couldn't help but feel an urge to learn more about her. So, she boldly asked him, "How about you come home with me?" Gray immediately agreed. Once they were at her place, Scarlet poured him a drink, and the two of them downed it in one go. As the alcohol took effect, they began to kiss passionately, both of them sensing a hunter's instinct in each other. But soon, Gray grew more and more dizzy, and without realizing it, he drifted into unconsciousness. When he woke up again, he found himself strapped to an operating table, surrounded by sharp instruments. It was the same scene as before, but this time, the prey was Gray himself. Scarlet forced a bottle of alcohol into his mouth, then took out a scalpel. As she cut open his mouth, Gray screamed in pain, but the more he screamed, the more excited Scarlet became. She shoved the scalpel into the space between his fingers. Then she moved on to his legs. From the very beginning, Scarlet Little Red Riding Hood had set the trap. She had feigned weakness and helplessness, luring the big bad wolf, Gray, into her carefully planned snare, and Gray's fate was sealed. He would be gutted by Scarlet, his insides replaced with stones, and then tossed into a well. Ethel, having set the bird free from its cage, the door creaked open, and Scarlet walked in. It turns out she had already booked her prey with Ethel, and that prey was none other than Gray. The wealthy Otawara's wife tragically passed away. His only daughter, Kiyoko, hoped that her father would remarry to replace her mother, wanting to keep his daughter from feeling lonely. Otawara listened to Kiyoko's suggestion. He married Sayuri, a famous geisha from the city, and welcomed her two daughters, Sawako and Makiko, into their home. Kiyoko was overjoyed with the arrival of her new mother and sisters. With so many people around her, she felt like the happiest person in the world. Kiyoko promised she would be a good and obedient younger sister. Sawako and Makiko quickly warmed to her enthusiasm, thinking that having such a sweet little sister would make their future life together peaceful and wonderful. Sawako mentioned to Makiko that Kiyoko's amethyst hairpin was very beautiful. She thought that if she asked Kiyoko for it, she might be willing to give it to her. What they didn't know was that Kiyoko was eavesdropping on their conversation outside the door. What they couldn't possibly imagine was that from this moment on, they had already become Kiyoko's playthings. Although Sawako and Makiko had gone from commoners to the daughters of a wealthy merchant, the habits they had formed during their poverty were deeply ingrained. Even though they were both stunningly beautiful, their mannerisms while eating were anything but graceful. Their mother, Sayuri, insisted they learn proper dining etiquette from now on, but just then, Kiyoko grabbed a steak and began devouring it hungrily. She found it amusing to mimic the way her sisters ate, and thought it made the food taste even better. Afterward, Kiyoko led her two sisters to their late mother's room. The room was filled with expensive jewelry and clothing. The lavish garments were irresistible to the sisters, and they couldn't stop admiring them. However, in their excitement, they began to fight over the clothes and accidentally tore one of the kimonos. They immediately started blaming each other for the mistake. This caused the servants, who were watching from the side, to feel deeply disappointed. They quietly murmured among themselves, "These new girls have no manners at all." Sawako wanted to go and scold the servants, but Makiko stopped her. The next day, a theft occurred in the mansion. Makiko's valuable hairpin had mysteriously disappeared. It was a gift from Kiyoko. Just then, the butler brought a maid into the room. The butler stated that the maid was parading around with this hair accessory. Makiko immediately recognized it as the missing hairpin. Without hesitation, she began to lash out at the maid. However, the maid insisted that she hadn't stolen anything. She claimed she had simply found the hairpin on the lawn outside. As a result of the incident, the maid was fired, but the other servants started whispering more about the new family, privately discussing their poor manners and behavior. Sawako overheard these conversations. Though they didn't say much, the servants could sense the resentment brewing. As a result, the servants became more anxious in their duties, constantly fearing they might make a mistake. But the more they feared, the more they made errors. One servant accidentally spilled soup, and that was when Makiko finally snapped. She had done nothing wrong, so why was everyone constantly criticizing her family's manners? Seeing her outburst, her father stepped in to calm the situation. He reminded everyone that if they dismissed all the servants, life in the mansion would become far more inconvenient. Kiyoko quickly apologized as well. She acknowledged that it was all her fault, which led to the misunderstanding among the maids about the two sisters. Kiyoko hoped that they could consider saving face for her and spare the maids. Back in the room, Makiko became more and more furious. Why had they done nothing wrong, yet the servants still looked down on them? Then, a thought suddenly flashed through Makiko's mind. She realized that the maid who had stolen the hairpin had acted very strangely. If she had stolen something, why would she flaunt it so openly? Makiko felt certain that someone was plotting against her. Just then, Makiko noticed someone eavesdropping behind the door. When they opened it, they found Kiyoko standing there. In that instant, they understood. It was Kiyoko who had been setting them up all along. Terrified, Kiyoko turned and fled. A scream suddenly pierced the air. When the two sisters rushed to check, they found that Kiyoko had fallen down the stairs. Father Otawara learned from the servants that Kiyoko had initially tried to comfort her two sisters, but they had frightened her away. Someone had even pushed her from behind, causing her to lose her balance and tumble down the stairs. Makiko quickly tried to explain. insisting that she had never pushed Kiyoko from behind. Odawara didn't listen to her continue speaking, but instead intended to have them leave here. But at that moment, Kiyoko, with her injuries, staggered in. She begged her father not to send her sisters away. Kiyoko explained that it was her own fault for accidentally falling down the stairs, and that it wasn't her sister's fault. Seeing that Kiyoko had forgiven them, Odawara chose not to press the matter any further. In the days that followed, Kiyoko continued to shower her two sisters with various expensive jewelry and clothing. She even went so far as to pretend to be a servant, so that her sisters could get used to commanding the household staff. Under Kiyoko's meticulous planning, Sawako and Makiko's attitude toward the servants grew increasingly cruel. Odawara decided he could no longer tolerate their behavior, so he prepared their passports, planning to send Sawako and Makiko abroad for their studies. At that moment, the two sisters were complaining to their mother, claiming that everything was part of Kiyoko's plot. Before they could say more, Sayuri silenced them. Not long after, Odawara tragically passed away in a car accident. The whole family was plunged into mourning. But at that moment, Kiyoko changed into the most luxurious attire. 5 years later, the three sisters had matured considerably. However, the Kiyoko who had once pretended to be a servant had long since grown accustomed to her role. She not only took care of her two sisters' daily needs, but also attended to her ailing stepmother, Sayuri. With great care, Kiyoko told Sayuri that the Count wanted to invite her to a dinner party, but Sayuri was too ill to attend. Kiyoko suggested that her sisters could go in her place. As the Count's son, Ichijo, had just returned from abroad, if either of her sisters could form a good relationship with Ichijo, it would be a great benefit to their family. Sayuri wondered why Kiyoko wasn't attending the dinner herself, but Kiyoko replied that, as a servant, she wasn't suited for such high society events. So, Sayuri agreed to Kiyoko's suggestion. Kiyoko then informed her two sisters about the dinner, and began preparing dresses for them to wear. When Makiko saw a photo of Ichijo, an idea suddenly came to her. She saw this as an opportunity. If Ichijo took a liking to one of them, they could escape this house with their mother, and live a much wealthier life. After putting on their glamorous gowns, the two sisters arrived at the Count's castle in a carriage, but the guests at the banquet immediately recognized them as Odawara's stepdaughters, and began to mock them coldly. Someone even deliberately bumped into Sawako. As Sawako quietly bent down to pick up her dropped earring, Ichijo, the Count's son, helped her retrieve it. Sawako assumed Ichijo liked her, and began to drink with an air of arrogance, but after 2 glasses, her true nature emerged. Her rude and clumsy behavior caused Ichijo to turn and walk away. Just then, a voice of praise rang out from the door. Makiko immediately rushed to see who it was. When she saw the familiar hairpin, she knew Kiyoko had arrived. Upon seeing Makiko, Kiyoko immediately knelt and began to apologize. She pitifully explained that she just wanted to wear the dress her mother had left her to attend a banquet, to see this colorful world. Kiyoko begged Makiko not to hold it against her. Her pitiful act disgusted Sawako, and she decided to teach Kiyoko a lesson on the spot. But Ichijo stopped her. He then ordered the two sisters to leave. Kiyoko, about to chase after her sisters to apologize, was stopped by Ichijo, who reassured her that she didn't need to worry. He invited her to dance with him. The tenderness and care in Ichijo's words made it impossible for Kiyoko to refuse. As the music began to play, the two danced gracefully in the ballroom. The elegant dance and the beautiful music made the past flood Kiyoko's mind. She remembered that the hairpin she had given to Makiko had been deliberately dropped in the garden for a servant to find. Her fall down the stairs had been intentional, a carefully orchestrated accident. When Kiyoko discovered her father was planning to send her two sisters abroad for studies, she feared that if they left, she would lose her toys. So, she tampered with the car, causing her father's tragic accident. Her stepmother, Sayuri, slowly weakened due to the chronic poison Kiyoko had been feeding her. In fact, Kiyoko had already killed Sayuri before the dinner, for she no longer needed a broken toy. Meanwhile, back at the house, Sawako and Makiko were furious when they saw their dead mother. They had long suspected Kiyoko's plans, but every time they tried to escape, Kiyoko had used Sayuri to threaten them. Now that Sayuri was dead, they were ready to expose the truth. However, no servant believed their words, and Kiyoko didn't care. After all, she was about to have a new toy to play with. The next day, Ichijo came to visit. Kiyoko pretended to be a victim, bullied by her two sisters, confirming their malicious nature, using his identity as the Count's son. Ichijo helped Kiyoko seize the family inheritance, and had the two sisters thrown out of the house. Sawako was furious, constantly banging on the door, but Machiko felt a sense of relief. They no longer had to pretend to play along with Kiyoko's wicked game. They were finally free. Soon after, Sawako became Ichijo's wife, and she would savor her new toy.